blogger in Houston of some repute who runs a blog called Blog Houston. And he was kind enough to send me a takedown of the Houston Chronicle by a lowly blogger citizen, or citizen blogger, who goes under the name Unca Darrell, U-N-C-A, Unca Darrell, like I used to call my mother's brother, Uncle Prest. And Unca Darrell wrote the following on September 2nd, 2013. And I read this in reference to the Harry Reid story about global warming. Of course, they call it climate change, which means we have to continue to use the word they used to use, which is global warming, which we were able to disprove because when the Earth's cycle was hot, they said, see, it's burning up. And we said, no, these are cycles. They come and go. Don't flatter yourself. You can't change this Earth. It'll be here when you're gone. And then the cycle started to drop. And then it started cooling. And they said, see, that shows Earth was getting hot because now it's cooler. No, that shows you're an idiot. So then they just said climate change. That's why you have to call it global warming, because it upsets them. So Harry Reid blames what's happened in Colorado and pretty much everything else. Maybe the guy at the Navy Yard, maybe he did that because of global warming. We're now being told by Bill Moyers that the reason for the Syria conflict is global warming. That's awesome. You can blame everything on global warming. It's like some sort of cartoon. So Unca Darrell writes, September 2nd, we survived. We survived. Exactly 5 years ago today, the Houston Chronicle warned that, quote, scientists are now predicting, end quote, that the Arctic would be free of ice, quote, within 4 or 5 years on account of anthropogenic global warming. So he says 5 years ago they said that it would happen within 4 or 5 years. Unca D took the bait. To check the Chronicle and its historical scientists, I just posted ticklers to my calendar for September 2nd, 2012 and 2013. Lord willing, I'll see then to see how the sea ice is faring. If I were a wagering man and could find a solvent counterparty at the Chronicle, I'd put big money on it. Just fine, thank you very much. So 5 years ago, when the Houston Chronicle wrote that article that within 4 or 5 was on the backside, within 4 or 5 years that the Arctic would be free of ice, it would have just melted away. So he said, all right, let's bet on it. Well, of course, nobody over there. I don't even know if they have any staff left. So then he writes, continues today, heard anything about the disappeared Arctic sea ice sheet? Nor have I. Nor has the National Snow and Ice Data Center, which reports that the seasonal August ice retreat was, quote, near average. And while we're at it, that Antarctic sea ice, quote, is near a record maximum extent. In other words, it not only did not melt, it's more than ever. He goes on to write, case closed. Score 1 for reality and common sense. 0 for febrile faith statements by radical environmentalists. The left's argument, as I've written elsewhere, goes something like this. It's hot. That's our fault. So give us your money and do as we say. The third part is the key. When global warming hysteria fades, as inevitably it will, another hysteria will take its place. Because the point, you see, is to say whatever is necessary to support the left's claim to power. Nothing more, nothing less. Though the Chronicle is considerably less hysterical than it once was, its role as retailer of left propaganda is unchanged. The saddest part is that the editors believe the nonsense they purvey, not as a scientist might understand facts, but as a pagan priest might believe his own incantations. I'm in a faraway land, unable to write more. I recommend you go back and read my original 5-year-ago righteous takedown of the original editorial. Well, I say, Uncle Darrell, I'm too busy. There are other things to discuss. I can't be going back and looking at what you wrote 5 years ago. But wait. If a citizen is going to take time away from his life to counter the prevailing nonsense of professional media, that so pervades in our society and is so influential whether we want it to be or not, the least I could do is go back and see what old boy said 5 years ago. Meltdown. With Arctic sea ice disappearing at a record rate, scientists are sounding the alarm. That was the headline. This is the headline and subhead of Tuesday's Chronicle editorial on global warming. So he wrote this 5 years ago. Sea levels are not cooperating as evidence for global warming. They recently dropped slightly. Nor have hurricanes, not so many, not so strong, nor even the only evidence that truly matters. Global temperatures, flat or down for a decade and still dropping. But Arctic sea ice did in fact shrink sharply in 2007. The event is called the Northern Hemisphere Sea Ice Anomaly, and it has its own website. The great hope among environmentalists was that 2008 would be even worse. So far, however, no such luck. The Arctic melt season is over. Ice extent this year was up, not down, by 9%. Undeterred by the facts, the Chronicle used this non-event as the peg for another dreary sermon about original sin, carbon. Is sea ice, in fact, disappearing at a record rate, as the subhead said? No, it's not. And to its credit, I suppose, the body of the editorial never exactly said it was. Oh, but they led us to believe it, didn't they? I want to go back to the paragraph he wrote a few weeks ago, 5 years after the fact. So 5 years ago, he pegs on his calendar to go back and look at this 5 years later and double it, because whoever really does that? And he said, listen to this, the left's argument, as I've written elsewhere, goes something like this. It's hot. That's our fault. So give us your money and do as we say. The third part is the key. When global warming hysteria fades, as inevitably it will, another hysteria will take its place. Because the point, you see, is to say whatever is necessary to support the left's claim to power. Let's look at the issue, shall we? A lot of people in America are sick. They're not able to afford really, really expensive health care that no one else in the world's getting either, like brain transplants. So give us your money and do as we say. Lots of people are losing their jobs because they're unskilled workers, and lawsuits have driven up the cost of wages in this country, lawsuits and unionization. So people are losing their jobs. We have to do something about it. So give us your money and do as we say. Think about it. First you state a problem that may or may not exist, and then you say, give us your money and do as we say. Wow. And to think, he's not an elected official.